Hello, and welcome to this week's issue of Last Week in AWS. I'm your humble podcast host, Mike Julian, filling in for Corey while he's off competing for gold in the world's saddest kazoo competition. A whole bunch of stuff happened in the world of AWS in the past 2 weeks. In no particular order, Amazon Bracket adds support for Rigetti's 84-qubit Anka 2 system. Now, I don't really know anything about quantum computing, but the thing that's interesting to me is that this actually launched only in Northern California region, which is a highly constrained region. And in particular, I realized that Bracket is actually only available in a handful of regions. That's US East 1, US West 1, which is California, US West 2, EU North 1, and EU West 2. That extends even to the QPUs and simulators that they talk about, with some of those only being available in very specific regions. This is sort of interesting to me, and I wonder what's driving those constraints.
Complicated environments lead to limited insight. This means many businesses are flying blind instead of using their observability data to make decisions. And engineering teams struggle to remediate quickly as they sift through piles of unnecessary data. That's why Chronosphere is on a mission to help you take back control with end-to-end visibility and centralized governance to choose and harness the most useful data. See why Chronosphere was named a leader in the 2024 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Observability Platforms at chronosphere.io.
Amazon announced the general availability of EC2 G6E instances. I know a whole bunch of you do a lot of work with GPU workloads, so I think you'll like this, that GPU 6E instances deliver up to 2.5x better performance compared to G5 instances and up to 20% lower inference costs than the P4D. Sadly, only available in Northern Virginia, Ohio, and Oregon regions for now, but I'm sure they'll expand that. EC2 status checks now support the reachability health of attached EBS volumes. That you couldn't do this before has always bugged me, so I'm really glad to see this change. Amazon EMR now supports prioritized and capacity-optimized prioritized allocation strategies for EC2 instances, which is definitely a hell yes for me. This opens the door to a lot of EMR cost optimization opportunities. Amazon OpenSearch now supports Graviton 3 instances. That's the C7G, M7G, R7G, and R7GD. OpenSearch is one of the services that can safely be switched over to 100% Graviton for some pretty easy cost savings, and now we've got Graviton 3 support for it. AWS announces Amazon-provided contiguous IPv4 blocks. I'm honestly not sure what the point of this actually is. The announcement says, quote, customers want to use Amazon-provided contiguous IPv4 blocks in their networking and security constructs like ACLs, route tables, security groups, and firewalls, as opposed to using many individual discontiguous public IPv4 addresses that can be cumbersome to manage. Which all that makes sense to me, but that's the sort of problem you'd encounter when you have a whole heap of a lot of addresses. While the pricing page gives examples for, at the very largest, a /29 block, which is 8 addresses. I can see this being a real problem when you start trying to handle something, say like /26 and larger, which is 64 IPs and larger than that. So I'm not really sure exactly what's going on with this announcement. I'm sure someone finds it useful. If you're one of those people, we'd love to hear from you. Amazon S3 now supports conditional writes. I like this quite a bit, particularly because there's no additional charge for those conditionals. I can foresee this being some cost reduction and performance optimizations for some patterns here through reducing API requests. Amazon S3 adds additional context to the HTTP 403 access denied error messages. The amount of hassle this saves us all could be immense. It's always been a pain in the ass trying to figure out exactly why an S3 bucket was denying access, so now we're going to know. Amazon S3 no longer charges for several HTTP error codes. The intention with this was announced informally on Twitter some time ago, and this is the formal announcement that all the changes have been implemented. They do make a full list of error codes that are no longer billed and publicly available, so check the documentation. AWS Code Build now supports Mac builds. We've all had that Mac in the server closet that we conveniently forgot to tell the auditors about. Now you can turn it off and move on to wondering if the auditors are just literally clowns. AWS Identity and Access Management now supports Private Link in all commercial regions. This seems like it's important, but I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure how exactly. That's probably due more to two of the hardest things in AWS, IAM and AWS networking, generally just make me feel very dumb, but this does seem to be pretty interesting.
Complicated environments lead to limited insight. This means many businesses are flying blind instead of using their observability data to make decisions. And engineering teams struggle to remediate quickly as they sift through piles of unnecessary data. That's why Chronosphere is on a mission to help you take back control with end-to-end visibility and centralized governance to choose and harness the most useful data. See why Chronosphere was named a leader in the 2024 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Observability Platforms at chronosphere.io.
AWS Network Firewall introduces GeoIP filtering to inspect traffic based on geolocation. This seems pretty neat. I know a lot of folks use third-party systems to prevent access to certain geographic locations or prevent inbound access from those geographic locations. So I'm sure this native functionality is quite welcome. AWS announces a new service called AWS Parallel Computing Service. I feel like it's been a while since we've had a service launch outside of reInvent, and I didn't really expect one, and I certainly didn't expect it to be something about HPC rather than Gen AI. So props to the team for launching their new service. Speaking of new launches, AWS launches a new region in Malaysia. There are now 34 AWS regions. AWS Lambda introduces recursive loop detection APIs, which seems pretty handy. And lastly, AWS KMS introduces a new encryption. We now have ECDH support in KMS. And that's what happened last week in AWS. If you've enjoyed reading this or listening to this or whatever it is you're doing with this, let us know. Feel free to submit a review and, 5 stars. And with that, I'm off. Next week, we'll have Corey Quinn back to tell me all the things that I did wrong. Have a great weekend.